Ambassador Krell stood at the viewing window of the Galactic Council station, his 4 eyes fixed on the massive human warship that hung in the void like a sleeping predator. The vessel was called the Emperor's Judgment, and it was bigger than anything the Valkyrie had ever built. Its hull was covered in weapons that could crack planets open like eggs. 50 years ago, Krell's grandfather had been one of the council members who laughed at the human delegation. He had watched the recordings many times. The humans had come in a small ship, wearing simple clothes, asking politely for membership in the Galactic Council. They wanted trade agreements. They wanted to share technology. They wanted friendship. The Council had refused. Not just refused, but mocked them. The Draven representative had called humans primitive apes who had barely learned to walk upright. The Kalosi delegates said their planet was too small, too insignificant, too far from the center of civilized space. The Valkyrie, Krell's own people, had been the cruelest. They said humans would never amount to anything. They said giving them council membership would be like giving a seat to insects. The human ambassador had remained calm throughout the insults. She had simply nodded, gathered her documents, and walked out of the chamber. Before leaving, she had turned back and said something that no one understood at the time. She had said, "We will remember this." Now, 50 years later, everyone understood exactly what she meant. The first sign of change came 10 years after the rejection. Human ships began appearing at the edges of known space, exploring regions that other species considered too dangerous. They mapped the deadly Vorax Nebula. They charted paths through the shattered expanse. They discovered 17 new habitable worlds in sectors that the Council had declared empty. The Council paid little attention. Exploration was interesting, but not threatening. Let the humans play in the dangerous corners of the galaxy. Eventually, they would learn their place. 20 years after the rejection, human trading vessels started appearing in Council space. Their ships were faster than anyone expected. Their goods were surprisingly high quality. They offered fair prices and honored every contract perfectly. Some smaller species began trading with them secretly, afraid of Council disapproval but unable to resist the profits. The Council issued warnings. Trading with non-member species was discouraged, but the warnings had no teeth. The humans were doing nothing illegal, just operating in the gaps between Council rules. 30 years after the rejection, everything changed. A massive fleet of unknown ships emerged from uncharted space. They were called the Harvok Collective, and they did not come to trade. They came to consume. Their ships were living things that ate metal and flesh alike. They swept through the outer territories like a plague, destroying colony after colony. The Council mobilized its combined fleet. 2,000 warships from 12 species gathered to face the threat. The battle lasted 3 hours. When it was over, only 400 Council ships remained. The Harvok had lost nothing. Panic spread through Council space. Emergency sessions were called. Evacuation plans were drawn up. Some species began building generation ships, preparing to flee into the unknown and hope they could escape. Then, the humans arrived. No one had asked for their help. No one had even thought to contact them. But a fleet of 300 human vessels dropped out of faster-than-light travel right in the path of the Harvok advance. They were outnumbered 10 to 1. Every military expert in Council space declared them already dead. The battle lasted 19 hours. When it was over, the Harvok Collective no longer existed. Every single one of their living ships had been destroyed, burned down to atoms by human weapons that no one had ever seen before. The humans had lost 60 vessels. They considered it acceptable losses. The Council immediately requested a meeting. They wanted to thank the humans. They wanted to offer delayed membership. They wanted access to those weapons. Their message was filled with humble words and promises of eternal friendship. The human response was short. It said, "We will consider your request. Do not contact us again until we respond." The Council waited. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. A full year passed with no word from human space. During that year, things changed in ways nobody expected. The human fleet did not return home after the battle. It remained in Council space, patrolling the borders. When asked why, the human commander said they were ensuring no Harvok survivors remained. The Council accepted this explanation because they had no choice. More human ships arrived. They called themselves the Imperial Navy, representing something called the Terran Empire. The title confused the Council. 50 years ago, the humans had been a small species with a few colony ships. Now they called themselves an empire? It seemed like a joke. It was not a joke. 40 years after the rejection, the humans finally responded to the Council's request for a meeting. But the response was not what anyone expected. Instead of agreeing to talks, the humans announced that they were assuming protective control of all territories formerly threatened by the Harvok Collective. For security purposes, they said, to ensure nothing like the Harvok ever threatened civilized space again. The Council objected. Those territories belonged to Council members. The humans had no authority to claim them. The human response arrived within the hour. It was accompanied by a fleet of 2,000 warships that materialized at the edge of Council core space. The message was simple. It said, "Your objection has been noted and dismissed. Do not test our patience." The Council fell silent. Now, 50 years after the rejection, Ambassador Krell watched the Emperor's judgment and understood the truth that his grandfather never lived to see. The Council had not rejected a primitive species. They had rejected a patient one, a species that did not forget insults, a species that built quietly, planned carefully, and struck when the moment was perfect. The door behind Krell opened. His assistant rushed in, trembling with fear. "Ambassador, the human delegation has arrived. They are demanding immediate audience with the full Council." Krell turned from the window. Demanding? When did humans start demanding things from the Council? His assistant's voice was barely a whisper. "When they started patrolling our space, sir. Their commander says this is not a request. The Council will assemble within the hour, or there will be consequences." Krell closed all four of his eyes and took a slow breath. He remembered his grandfather's stories about how the Council used to run the galaxy, how they made rules and everyone followed them, how they decided which species mattered and which ones could be ignored. Those days were gone forever. The Council chamber was full when the human delegation entered. Every species was represented. Every seat was taken. But the atmosphere was nothing like the old days. There was no casual conversation, no political maneuvering, no displays of power. Everyone sat in silence, waiting to hear what the humans would say. The human delegation consisted of 3 individuals. 2 were soldiers in black armor, carrying weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. The third was a woman in a simple gray uniform. She had gray hair and cold eyes, and she walked like someone who owned every room she entered. Krell recognized her from the old recordings. She was older now, her face lined with years and experience, but it was definitely her. The same ambassador who had been laughed out of this chamber 50 years ago? She stopped in the center of the room and looked around slowly, meeting every eye, acknowledging every species that had mocked her people so long ago. "I remember this room," she said. Her voice was calm, but carried easily to every corner of the chamber. "I remember standing here as a young woman, hoping that we could find friendship among the stars. I remember being told that humanity was too primitive, too small, too insignificant." She paused, letting the silence grow heavy. "I told you then that we would remember. We did. Every insult, every joke, every dismissive gesture. We wrote them all down and kept them safe, not out of hatred, but as motivation. Every time our scientists grew tired, they read those words and found new energy. Every time our soldiers wanted to rest, they remembered how you laughed at us." The Draven representative shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The Kelosi delegates stared at the floor. No one dared to speak. 50 years ago, you could have had us as friends. We would have shared everything with you. Our science, our art, our strength. We wanted nothing more than to be part of something larger than ourselves. But you decided we were not worthy. She clasped her hands behind her back. Now the situation is different. The Terran Empire controls 40% of known space. Our fleet is larger than all Council fleets combined. Our technology is generations ahead of anything you possess. We protected you from the Harvok, not because we care about you, but because the Harvok threatened our borders as well. It was convenience, nothing more. Krell found his voice. What do you want from us? The human ambassador smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Want? We want nothing from you. We need nothing from you. We came here today to inform you of changes that have already been decided. The Council will continue to exist, but only as an advisory body to the Terran Empire. All major decisions regarding defense, trade, and expansion will be reviewed by Imperial authorities. Your fleets will operate under Imperial supervision. Your territories will remain yours, but only because we allow it. Protests erupted throughout the chamber. Shouts of outrage filled the air. This was unacceptable. This was tyranny. This was everything the Council had feared. The human ambassador raised one hand. The two soldiers beside her lifted their weapons. The chamber fell instantly silent. I understand your objections, she said. 50 years ago, I had objections too. I objected to being called a primitive. I objected to being told my species was worthless, but no one cared about my objections then. No one listened when I spoke of fairness and mutual respect. She lowered her hand, and the soldiers lowered their weapons. You taught us a valuable lesson that day. You taught us that the galaxy does not care about fairness. It only cares about power. We learned that lesson well. We built our power in silence while you celebrated your superiority. And now, we are simply applying the rules you taught us. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. The Council dismissed us once. You will not have that opportunity again. Imperial patrols will continue in your space indefinitely. Our administrators will arrive within the month to begin integration procedures. Cooperate, and your people will prosper under our protection. Resist, and you will learn that humanity's patience, while great, is not infinite. She walked out without waiting for a response. The two soldiers followed. The door closed behind them with a sound of finality. Krell sat in his chair for a long time after the humans left. The other council members argued and shouted and blamed each other. Some wept, some raged. Some simply stared into space, trying to understand how everything had changed so completely. Through the viewing window, Krell could see more human ships arriving. They came in perfect formation, their lights blazing against the darkness of space. They were beautiful and terrible, like a storm that would never end. His grandfather had laughed at humans 50 years ago. He had called them apes who would never amount to anything. He had died believing that the galaxy belonged to species like the Volthri, the Draven, the Kelosi. He had been so incredibly wrong. The galaxy belonged to humanity now, and humanity had a very, very long memory.